Seeing yourself like that, I've seen myself in the mirror many times, but this was like I'm seeing myself from a different perspective. It's not me looking at myself, it's me looking at myself, but there's two of us. I don't know. And I got scared and I was like, I must have died. What happened? I overdid it. And like that fear snapped me back in my body, opening my eyes, gasping in. And it was like the first breath I'd ever taken. It's like I was reborn in that moment.
Gio, welcome to the Modern Masculinity podcast, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm glad to be here and hopefully share something that provides some value.
Gio, take us into your world, though. You're someone who've impacted, I don't know, a number of people, a multitude of people, myself, one of them included with your programs. And a lot of people sometimes put those people on sort of a pedestal and think that, everything is all fantastic and, they've reached nirvana and are living in perpetual bliss. And perhaps that is the case. But take us into your world. What sort of things are you still mucking through or loads you're still carrying as a man?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like I'm 43, so there's been definitely a lot of ups and downs and swings. And, I've gotten to the point where I recognize the peaks and valleys. And so when I'm sort of kind of going on a peak, I'm like, okay, like a new challenge is probably around the corner, something that I still need to learn about or learn from. So, I try to take it in stride. I'd say right now I'm closer to one of the peaks versus a valley. My kids are middle-aged, high school. Things are pretty good at home. Working through business stuff, like trying to scale, a business, in a space of wellness, maybe spirituality, and fighting with, do I really want to scale or what do I really want in my life? Do I want more work? Because I've worked a lot in the last, since I've been 18. And it's just really trying to think ahead as to, if I could really design my life, what would that look like? And what am I pressure I'm feeling now, which is to conform to what is that next step? Is that actually what I want? And do I have to do it like that? Or can I do my own thing? And so it's been an interesting year of a lot of frustration around the business side, like trying things that didn't work and then things working that probably weren't supposed to work. And ultimately just grappling with, sometimes, I don't know if it's like existential boredom or sometimes feeling like, what is the point? Like these things come in. It's like, okay, like what am I supposed to be doing? And it doesn't feel like this is it, but I'm not sure what that is. And I think, people listening would go like, that's not really something I struggle with or problem. But, sometimes it's like, okay, like, there's all these things happening in the world that don't really make a lot of sense. It feels like we're coming to this really interesting extreme of duality where there's so much oppositional energies. And as kids that are young and, me middle-aged, like what is the future going to actually look like? And sometimes that really keeps me up at night, as to like, what is the world that I want to live and look like? And how can I contribute to that at least, although it feels like sometimes it's daunting and impossible to like see how things can course correct. I try to be an optimist in some way and say, okay, like if I can't change it from the top, what can I do from where I'm at to make a difference and make a small shift? That's kind of where I'm at a high level. I don't know if that was kind of what you were looking for, but
it's a great, I think, frame and intro. I'm reminded one of the songs that was part of my Kairos presentation in high school. And I went to a Catholic school and Kairos is sort of this, it's sort of an initiation. So looking back on it, I'm sort of grateful for those sort of things. I had my own sort of interesting relationship with the church, but the Kairos specifically was always a positive experience. And I thought that kids sort of need to be presented with real life sometimes before it hits them, right? It's nice to prep them a little bit. And one of the songs that I used or somehow fell into my lap, and it was interesting. I wasn't even like a big Michael Jackson fan, or it's one of his less popular songs. At least it was the Man in the Mirror song. It really just stood out to me. And I don't know why, but looking back on it, I guess almost 20 years later, I'm like, oh, there was so much truth and so much profundity, I think is the word, but like so much profound wisdom in that. And it seemed to sink into me. And I'm grateful now because I've had similar things when you scroll a Twitter feed or you scroll any sort of feed, you're just inundated with this craziness, right? And so it's like, what is the point? And my kids are a little younger, they're 6 and 7. And that I come back to that often though. It's like we start within ourselves. We not fix the home, but if we focus on our home, that is something that we can do amidst all of this seeming chaos that's around us.
Yeah. And I think ultimately, through my own journey anyways, like it has led me to have more of a spiritual outlook on life and to find comfort in the mystery and the unknowing and to trust that, this is all happening for a reason I might not understand yet. But if there is reason for it, then there's reason for everything that's happening as well. Through deepening my faith in God, not religiously, but believing in a creator and feeling that it's like, okay, like I just got to make the best use of my time here in the best way that feels good to me. And if I do that, then I'll know that it feels like I don't even really think the word accomplishing is the right word, but it feels like I'm in alignment with this whole process, and my whole life was feeling very lost, trying to figure that out as a man growing up, trying to be successful, making money, proving myself, all the things that we go through as men to realize like I'm just chasing all these dead ends, I'm just running in circles. Now I'm at a place where like, yeah, now even amidst the chaos too, there's this weird sense of calm, which is like, okay, like whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and yeah, I can intentionally create my life. And I'm a firm believer in that. But at the same time is not to like worry about the things that will happen. It's to be able to embrace them and engage with life no matter what comes up. And that has helped me to kind of find balance in this kind of storm that we're in. And at the same time, as the world is super crazy and can have like look like impending doom at times, there's still at the same time so much beauty and so much amazing experiences, so many things that I get to be a part of now in my life where I didn't think was possible before. And the funny thing is a lot of it has nothing to do with how successful, I am or not. It's about just finding, the truth in the human experience, which is really for me comes down to like exploration, expansion, human connection, being present, not stuck in your mind, to be able to really engage in the richness of life because it can be so rich. And for a long time, like I heard a lot of these spiritual teachers talk about these things. And it didn't make any sense to me, like how could, quieting my mind and being present, be so blissful? It's like, okay, well, you spend a lot of time in the chaos of your mind going a million miles per hour and worrying about everything and trying to figure it all out. Like coming to that is like, okay, I can see how all that stuff is still going on, but now I'm kind of like surfing the wave instead of getting caught in the undertow. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm curious. I would love to know sort of how you got into sort of spirituality and sort of your perspectives and how they sort of evolved. I've shared with the listeners that I have my Catholic upbringing, but it was sort of meditation that was the intro into it. And I've had a contemplative practice for now, I think going on almost 20 years. But there was an interesting thing that I saw. Meditation didn't quite, it's weird saying, like, didn't quite get me there, right? It lacked in a way that somatic work and specifically breath work for me has sort of enabled and opened up. And it's sort of the 1-2 punch, right? I think about like if I lean on both so much, and meditation was such a great foundation. But I'm curious whether it was from the actual somatic work and that, or whether it was sort of the spiritual perspectives. How was that evolution for you, and how did that end up playing out?
Yeah, I guess like I can walk through kind of the steps that happened, but ultimately, the more wise I get in my old age, I realize that everything in my life, whether it's my business, my family, like decisions you make is part of that spiritual process of awakening, deeper understanding and awareness. Like anything can be looked at through that lens, because life is all these mirrors and challenges that are coming to kind of like press against your fears and your worries and your beliefs and give you an opportunity to show up in a different way every single time. So like as early as I can remember, I was thinking things that I felt I shouldn't be thinking, staring up into the sky and questioning, does God really exist? I remember being at church, staring at Jesus on the cross and saying, just wink at me, let me know that you're real. You're just a statue here. And all these people are here. Like, I don't know if you really existed, like what was going on, thousands of years ago, but if you're real, can't you just give me a wink? Like, why not? I realize now that obviously the mystery is part of it, like having that faith in finding yourself. If God just told you he exists and you knew, like your whole life experience would be completely different. You'd just drop everything you're doing and devote everything to God. And I think there's some stories in the Bible where that happens, where like God actually comes and speaks to them. Whether that happened or not, I don't know, but they're really compelling stories. Like, okay, if that would happen to me, I would definitely drop everything I'm doing because now I got the sign that I'm looking for. But, like growing up in a very Catholic Italian neighborhood just north of Toronto, everyone thought the same, dressed the same, did the same things. It was a really interesting place to grow up, competitive. People had, it was middle class. We definitely were at the lower end of that. So just seeing like things that other people had that I didn't was a driver. And being told that if you want to be happy, you need to be successful was like, okay, like I got to make money. That was kind of the thing that was driving me to prove myself, to show that I'm worthy, I'm good enough. Playing sports was kind of one way to kind of try to do that as a teen growing up. But still, the real measure was like you had money, you had a nice car, you had friends, success. So I spent a good part of, as soon as I figured out what a business was, I started, trying to make money, buying and selling stuff and odd jobs here and there, and went to business school. So I was smart enough to get into a really good business school and realized quickly I couldn't work for a big corporation. So I became, doubled down on the entrepreneur side. And then, just started doing all these different jobs, like got into construction, I got into insurance, I was in the food industry, I had a food manufacturing company, we did like gluten-free foods, I had a clothing company at one time, just all over the place. It was just like, can we make money doing this? Very transactional. It wasn't like, oh, I love doing this, I'm inspired. I was like, can I try to make money doing this? Let's hustle, let's see if we can make this work. At one point, I was probably the top imported cannoli salesman in North America. I could say with pretty much confidence. There wasn't an actual like measurement tool to say that, but and you don't make a lot of money selling cannolis, but it was like kind of like an accomplishment. We were doing really good. I was making some money. I just got married, had a mortgage, had a kid, and I remember waking up side of my bed, kind of this daydream, and just looking at my hands and visualizing these really old, wrinkly hands, like my grandfather's. And this thought came into my head, was like, oh, you're clever. You found out how to make a little bit of money. You got like, I got my used BMW in the driveway, which is the car I always wanted. And, going one vacation a year to some all-inclusive resort, drink my face off for a week to escape all my problems. It's like, I can do this for the next 20, 30, 40 years, die in the same bed, and who cares? Like, that was like the bleak, like, who cares? Like, what's the point? And in 20, 30 years after you die, no one's even going to remember who you are. Maybe your kids, a couple of decades after that. Like, so what are you actually doing here was the question. And then I was like, okay, so I felt really recognized. And again, I lived most of my life in my head. I was a problem solver. I was a thinker. I guess I was sensitive as a kid. So I just didn't want to feel those. So like I figured out how to like operate through my mind. If I'm smart people, I can help people with their homework, and then I'll be valuable and important, and, like all that kind of stuff. So I felt this feeling for the first time of feeling unfulfilled. I didn't know what it was, but obviously I was escaping it through partying, through trying to make more money, every transaction. And attached to that feeling of unfulfillment was a lack of purpose. What is my purpose? So the first time I'm really like realizing what these feelings are. And I'm just like, okay, I got to figure that out. Again, go back to my mind. Is a problem I could solve. But I realized pretty quickly, it's very hard to solve a problem of the heart with the mind. A spiritual problem. You can't think your way through it. It's almost impossible. But I tried. I went on Google and typed in, what is the meaning of life? What's the point? Thinking like Google. Like, there was no ChatGPT. I'm sure ChatGPT would give me a much more eloquent answer nowadays, knowing, all of my searches and stuff like that. It led me to Alan Watts videos and stuff like that. So I started diving down the spiritual path, read the Bhagavad Gita, just exploring, trying to absorb as much information, try to find understanding. Maybe there's a secret in one of these other religions. Maybe there's, reading into mysticism and, even like esoteric stuff and all kinds of Kabbalah and Hermes, and reading things that were quite interesting, but not really embodying much, just more mental kind of masturbation, if anything, but things that were interesting, different ways of thinking of things. I was opening my mind. And then in one of the YouTube videos, it was an Alan Watts one, some of the comments said, if you think this is interesting, Terence McKenna will blow your mind. Like I remember it jumping out at me. And this is when I was starting to really learn that there was a thing called intuition. I could see my awareness sort of like, as I started inquiring about something, it would like, I could follow it, versus before the path was like, I'm going to figure this out, make a process and go from like A to Z. And so Terence McKenna talked about psychedelics, magic mushrooms, and ayahuasca. I never heard anyone talk about that like that before. And immediately I just felt something inside of me say, okay, like this is what you need to go and explore. Like this is, you'll find some answers here. And so I went to go tell my wife, at the time, pregnant with our second child, that, hey, I'm going to go to the jungle in Brazil. I'm going to drink some magic brew with some shamans, puke my brains out, maybe crap my pants, lose my mind. I think it's going to be really good for me. And she's just like, have you completely lost your mind? Like, what are you thinking? I was a salesman, like I mentioned. So a little bit of negotiation later, I was on my way down to Brazil. And in that first experience, I had a death experience. And, humbled me in so many ways. One, showing me that I knew nothing about anything. The consciousness, the universe is so vast, so much vaster than I could have even imagined possible, which was exciting and scary at the same time. And also, when I died, I came back to life. My body decayed. I came back as the maggots that were eating me in the grass, and came through the dirt into the sun. And it was this wild experience. But I realized I had a really deep fear of death, that it was trying to show me like, hey, this doesn't end here. Although I wasn't sure how much I believed it, but this experience showed me, and it was like, okay, like I can see how this is possible. And so when I came back, I just was like, okay, I need to find people outside of my bubble that I can learn from, that can help me to expand, my understanding, or at least, share things that they've kind of gone through. And that kind of led me into all these different things, from finding more plant medicine to different types of psychedelics, to breath work, to meditation, to different gurus. And somewhere along the line, I met Wim Hof, and he became my first breathwork teacher. And, I did an interview. I had a podcast at the time. I was working on a website, and this is before he was super popular. And he invited me to come to his first training. I know nothing about breathwork, cold exposure. I just saw a bunch of his videos. This guy's climbing mountains in his shorts. Like, hey, this is going to be super cool. Maybe I'll take a picture of him, put on my Instagram, get some followers or something crazy like that. But when I went, I met like 30 or 40 other guys, some women too, different walks of life, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, professions, and every person, this opening circle, sharing how through breathwork, being in nature, cold exposure, mindfulness practice, their life changed in the last year. Like chronic pain, anxiety, depression, insomnia, infertility, like you name it. Like as they're going around, it's like something more unbelievable than the next. And I'm just like, how is this all possible? I didn't think that it could be possible. And so my realm of possibility is like expanding rapidly over these few years. And, we do the whole week, jump into frozen lakes and climb the mountains and all that crazy, amazing stuff. And at the end, we go through this breathwork experience that Wim leads us through. He's banging a drum, we're breathing deeper. And next thing you know, I'm like, my body's vibrating and I have this full out of body experience. I'm like floating at the top of this 20-foot like log cabin, and I'm looking down and I see myself. Seeing yourself like that, I've seen myself in the mirror many times, but this was like, I'm seeing myself from a different perspective. Like it's not me looking at myself, it's me looking at myself, but there's two of us, I don't know. It was just, and I got scared and I was like, I must have died. Like what happened? I maybe overdid it. And like that fear snapped me back in my body. I remember opening my eyes, gasping in. And it was like the first breath I'd ever taken. It was like I was reborn in that moment. And immediately I feel this welling of emotion coming up. And I'm just like, okay, Gio, don't cry. Guys don't cry. There's all these people here. And before I can even finish that thought, it's like, boom, floodgates are open. I'm wailing like a baby. And it felt amazing. It felt like a release of all those years of putting so much pressure on myself to succeed and perform and to be somebody. And this voice came back in my head, that same voice that was at the edge of my bed, kind of guiding me, which I don't even know if it's God, my higher self, or what. Maybe it's just, I got a few voices in my head. I don't know, because I talk to myself a lot. Hey man, you're doing a good job. Keep following your heart. You're on the right path. Don't give up. Like this is what's coming in as I'm crying. I don't even know what's going on. Like I was just up there, now I'm down here. But there was something very special about it that never left me in that moment. And I realized I had to get out of my head, and the breath work helped me get out of my head and have this out of body experience where I can tap into something a lot deeper than what was in my mind. Now I know, like the mind is all these programs that are trying to help you survive. It's just like an AI that we've developed through like scanning and life experience and building these programs. Like it's the ego. And it's like, hey, don't do that. It just wants you to survive. But the heart is where all the magic is where the expansion is where the intuition is. It's where that path that you're trying to figure out in life is stored in there, the intelligence that can connect you to that, which is what I think is a pathway back to God, which I think we're all a little piece of God, forgetting himself. Alan Watts said in a video, and it really stuck with me, to just have this experience. And maybe we're trying to evolve into something, but there was something special about that. That's okay, like I need to understand this more. And I went back and tried to find anyone I could that could teach me about breathwork. A lot of it was like self-study, finding yogis and hippies from the 70s that were doing like holotropic. And slowly my own practice developed. I ended up spending some time at Institute of Heart Math that were doing all these amazing studies around the heart and intelligence field, quantum field. Slowly I started getting back to that space, using some meditation, visualizations, with using breathwork to alter my state. I started having these experiences and exploring, and it was helping me get out of my mind to lead me, to that next thing. And there's still a lot of learning I had to do because I still had a good 10 years of learning lessons of what not to do, what to do, and mistakes I'd made, and getting out of businesses because they were pointless. But listening more to like how I was feeling, like I could tell like, oh, I'm not supposed to be doing this. I could feel it. I wasn't overpowering it with my brain anymore. Saying like, hey, there's a prize at the end. It's like, hey, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. And so many times, logically, the decisions I made no sense. I could see later how my heart was leading me. And now I learn more and more to listen to that intuition to save myself time, pain, and, misery because the mind is like kind of leading me astray. And, that's how the elemental rhythm was created. I started just experimenting with myself, created something that was working for me, started sharing with others. They were having these experiences. And, slowly a breathwork company was formed. And, I was like, again, the mind's like, how are you going to make money doing this? This is silly. What are you doing? It's like, I just want to help people. I don't care. Like, it was like the heart was saying, don't worry, just do it with like as much as you can with your intention, follow your heart, and something more amazing than you can imagine with your mind will happen. That was like the insight. And so I just did that. And slowly I could see it happening, new connections, new experiences, new opportunities. And my life really started to evolve from there, but it was a slow process of going from like 100% like operating from the mind, left brain analytical, to now, I would say more balanced, where I can still use all the gifts that I've acquired through all those hard experiences that caused me to kind of like figure things out, but now using my heart as more of the lead, and then using my mind to kind of figure out, okay, what happens next?
Well, I think so many guys we talk a lot about on the show, like the programming that guys are running. And for me, I was going through with my kids the other day, all of the personal development books that I've read and, how to do more and the 10X rule and, really about this left brain sort of, growing. And I remember there was a time where I hit a limit where I could try and add on more. And for whatever reason, I would self-sabotage my way into the same sort of spot. And it made me realize like, oh, there's something else going on here. And it's tend to coincide with my, my divorce and the relationship and all that sort of falling apart. And so it was this entryway to a mirror is sort of what you called it to fix what was going on. And breathwork sort of became that ability. What I didn't realize on the other side of it, though, was this sort of enhanced intuition, which you talked about, because that was always seen as like either like a feminine thing or something that like some people had and some people didn't. And so I'd always just chalked it up to like, I don't have that. I'm not lucky. I don't, and so what's your connection between this work and intuition? And also you mentioned intention as well, being able to lead from there. Like, how do those play together?
Yeah. So I think the problem that I realize, and when I'm coaching and stuff like that, even in my own process, is like, if you have so much noise going on in your mind, you can't hear the subtle voice of your heart. It's impossible. So you just get wrapped up, and it kind of, that goes like push to the background, because it's always been speaking to you, and some of us, many of us have learned to shut off our emotions completely because it's too painful. And a lot of times it happens in childhood. So, dad's like, doesn't give you the time of day, you're not good enough, you're a piece of shit, or is too busy working all the time. Any of that rejection, it hurts. And so what we do is like, we build this stone wall around our hearts, we can't feel. And when you can't feel, automatically your other senses get stronger. Like if people that are blind, they're hearing, their other senses, they become amplified. So what do you think happens when the heart gets shut off? Your mind kind of takes over. So then you're in thought. And so when you're thinking too much, or you're looking at social media all the time, or, you have all of these programs in the background running on autopilot that is like survival mechanism. It's like, I can't trust them. Watch out. This is danger. You're going to go bankrupt. These low level beliefs, all this noise. Of course you can't hear what's going on in here. So it took like practices that could shut off the mind. Breathwork was amazing. Ayahuasca was amazing. And then once it started doing that, it's like I had to create the space to kind of listen, to kind of be quiet, to start recognizing how things made me feel, be able to express how I felt, and it's really helped in my relationships and my business, to kind of like, when I have a feeling about something, to talk about it. If my partner's doing something I don't like, or it feels wrong to me, I want to understand more versus judge them, hold resentment. Because you start going in the mind, you start making these stories, and you kind of get locked in here. I'm trying to justify what I'm feeling, so my mind's going to take over and create a story around it. And so the first thing about intuition is you got to quiet your mind. And, meditation is very hard for most people because, once you sit down, that monkey mind just goes nuts because there's so much in there. That's why breath work is an active process that has actually been proven to change your brainwave state. Your brainwaves go from beta to alpha and theta. The prefrontal cortex, the default mode network, is where the analytical mind resides, the ego. And they say the ego just wants to keep you safe, wants you to survive. It doesn't care how good your life is. It doesn't care if you're happy. It's just like, you're not dying. I don't want to change anything, because anything different than this, we might not be able to survive. I know where we are. Let's operate here. Let's stay here. So that leap to that next evolution is always going to be trying to be held back by your doubt, which is your ego. Hey, it's not safe out there. If you quit this job, you're going to be in the street. You're going to be living like this. And when your heart's like, hey, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is non-alignment. And there's this push and pull. And so sometimes it'll happen where like the universe or God or whatever will just rip it away from you, hit that rock bottom, lose your job, lose your relationship. And sometimes that's where people transform. So many people hit that rock bottom, but it doesn't have to be that way if you can start really looking at yourself. Look like that. Looking in the mirror thing is like taking a really good look at yourself and being honest with yourself. Also, quieting the mind, starting to feel in, following your intuition. And intuition is as simple as like curiosity. When you're a kid, remember you got excited, you were curious, you wanted to go explore the forest, you meet someone or you met a new girl as a potential relationship, that curiosity. A lot of us as we got older, we shut that off and became like very rigid and realistic. It's like, okay, I got to do this, I got to do that, and I'm not going to like explore. But when you stop exploring, you start dying. Like that's what starts happening. So it's like, how do we find that curiosity? And I ask people, like, what are you most curious about? Like, what do you mean? Like, is there something you want, like, that interests you? When you hear it, it's like, oh, I wish I knew more about that. Or maybe you saw someone playing guitar and like, oh, I wish I could do that. Or, something that inspired you. It's like, that's what you got to follow, because you can do anything you want if you really spend the time to kind of like get into it and you get out of your mind telling you can't do it. Like, I could never sing for my whole life. And in a plant medicine ceremony a couple of years ago, there's this guitar player and this guitar starts going. It's pitch black, can't see nothing. This voice comes out of nowhere. It's just like blows me away. Like the feeling of it was just like, I got emotional. I was like crying. And I remember, I was like, man, I wish I could sing like this. And immediately the spirit of the ayahuasca was like, got right in my face. It was like, hey, you can sing like that. You just got to find your voice. Don't try to be like someone else. Cause it was like, oh, if I want to sing, I want to sing like them. Why? Cause you want attention. You want like whatever. It's like, no, if you want to express yourself, if you really want to express the way you're feeling, sing about something that makes you feel. And I went back, picked up a guitar, and I could sing all of a sudden. I still can't probably sing like other people, but I found my voice. I can hold a tune on guitar. I can play my way. I'm not trained, but some people have said that I have a good voice. I feel like I don't care what I sound like, because when I'm singing, it just feels like this expression that comes from my soul, and it feels so good. But my mind told me a million times that I couldn't do it. But I had to kind of get out of that head and trust myself and just say, okay, like, I just want to share a feeling when I sing. And that's it. No expectation of people liking me or wanting to hear me more. It's like, I just want to share the way I'm feeling. And you can hear some artists that are so emotional when they sing, you feel it, right? So that's like one example. And then when it comes to intention for me is like the energy that you infuse into things that you do. Okay. Like, how do you intend to show up? Like, why are you doing this in the first place? The why is a little bit different. Like there's the why is the reason why you do it. Like why you want to do something, why you want to change, like the actual reason. Like you make a decision to change and there's like why I want to change, but then there's like how am I going to show up? And how do I really want to like infuse, like what kind of energy do I want to infuse in what this new path is? And another experience I had was like starting to get into my head about what other people were doing, competitors, comparison, which is something that I've had my whole life, in sports, with girls in high school, with, money, like we all compare. As I was like looking at my competitors and seeing them doing these really cool things on social media and like, oh, maybe I should do that. Maybe I could be more like them. The insight was like, you're looking in the absolute wrong direction. If you compare yourself to others, you only just keep putting you down. You're going to find out what they're better than, and you're going to diminish your own gifts. It's like, what do you want to do? How do you do that in the best way that you can? If you just focus all your energy on that, something amazing will happen. And it'll be something different than what they're doing, because only they can do that and only you can do what you do. If you're trying to copy someone else, you're always going to be a copy of them and probably not be as good as what they're doing. You can get inspiration from others. And we just really start seeing is like, am I operating from like a wounded place, a fearful place that I don't feel good enough, or I'm trying to do it to prove myself or feel better? Or am I coming from a place of like empowerment because I want to create something? I want to bring something in that has no real alternative motive. Like I need to prove myself. It's like, oh, really want to create this. And so that's where the intention started flowing. And then I was like, okay, like, let me just focus all my energy on what I want to create. Who am I creating this for? How do I bring the most value to serve? And as I started pouring that into my work, like things started changing. The way I felt, because I was less comparing to others, but my work was getting better. People were getting better results, better connections. They were telling more people about it, wanting to share it, because it came from this like more authentic vibration, this creative kind of vibration, which we're all creators. God is a creator. We create this place. It's almost like a playground. Like we're talking about before, duality. It's got to be scary and dark, but it also has the ability to create in it. Okay. And so which frequency do you want to tune to? This is where I kind of like get stuck about it. I see the darkness and the craziness. Okay. Like I'm still a creator. How can I create an opposing force to bring into this mix of what's happening right now? And hopefully, enough of us feel that vibration of creation and equality and unity and sharing and abundance versus greed and fear and hoarding and, war, that we can see a change. And I'm an optimist. And even if it's on this lifetime, I'm hoping that if I'm on that vibration, whatever happens next, I'm going to, go in that direction versus coming back to learn again.
The spiritual director at the sort of community that I go to for our, what the closest thing to a church, he talks about, being able to hold vigil, not necessarily participating in the duality, although we are of the world, but not, what is the saying? We're in the world, but not of it, sort of thing, to be able to sort of rise above. And I think that for me, the thing that's allowed that is getting out of my head. If I can move myself out of that brain state or those brain waves, or be caught up in, if I can move myself into my body, now I'm more receptive to that. And I think that that's just a whole new world for guys, because we definitely weren't trained or given those tools as we were getting older. When it comes to breath work, I remember I was talking to, she's not some girl, but I was talking to a female, a woman, and we were talking about breath work, and somehow it came up that I did it or that I was into it. And she said, "Oh, you probably do that like manly breath work stuff." And I was like, "Oh, I guess so. Maybe. I don't know. I didn't know there was like a differentiation." I can imagine that my neighbors feel some type of way when they hear me in probably one of your sessions, because I used to like care and I used to temper it and be like, "Oh, what are they going to think, with hearing these sounds?" I've stopped caring. I actually, in the one of the last sessions, I was like, actually, I hope, the neighbors have stopped and are out there on the curb, listening to this. Yeah, maybe they'll have an experience of their own. But with that being said, is there a type of breath work that is more suited to sort of what we are talking about in terms of helping guys get into their body, helping guys, get rid of that fear, that anxiety, that sort of programming? Or is it all sort of, the same?
Yeah. So breath work is like a blanket term. It's been around for thousands of years. Pranayama, the ancient yogis, Qigong. Breath has always been around. I've always known that it is like, and even all the religions, they talk about like the breath of life, the prana, which is what gives life. Like the breath is attached to spirit. Even like spira, like the word in Latin to breathe is also the root word for spirit. And so there's a few different things that I think are really important. So number one, at the base level, is just being aware of your breath. How am I breathing? And realize when you're stressed, how you breathe, when you're relaxed, how you breathe, and just starting to have breath awareness starts giving you that kind of like mindfulness and being more present, feeling into your body. So that's the first thing, just being aware of how you breathe. Slowing down your breath, breathing properly is like the next step, like breathing through your nose, trying to breathe into your belly, not into your chest. And then from there, practices that will help you to kind of slow down. It's like box breathing, 4-7-8. There's some simple practices that help to regulate the nervous system. So having a daily practice that is teaching you how to breathe properly to be more resilient and more calm is really, really important. Because that's going to start slowing down the brain waves, being more present in everyday moment, being more resilient when stressful things come up. Okay. And something called CO2 tolerance, your ability to tolerate carbon dioxide. They show that the more you can tolerate carbon dioxide, more resilient you're going to be. So it's practices. And it's like, breath holding, slowing down your breath, feeling that air hunger, and just moving more into that resilience. Your body will adapt to it. It's like a cold bath. The first time you go in, it's really hard. You do 20 of them, it gets a little bit easier. Your body starts adapting. Same with your breathing. So if you're breathing really shallow, if you're over breathing, you're in a fight or flight, like state of the nervous system, your mind's probably going to be really racing, your thoughts, your heart rate's going to be up. If you slow that down, you go more parasympathetic, rest and digest, you're more calm, you're less reactive, you're able to kind of like, in a stressful situation, make better decisions. So that's the first side of it. It's practicing, daily practice of resilience. So I would even say just box breathing. Navy SEALs use it to be calm in stressful situations. On the other end is the more of the exploratory breath. It's more going into that subconscious mind where the beliefs are, releasing emotion. We store so much in our bodies, trauma, feelings, things that happen to us in our life. And, we stuff them in and we hold on to them. We don't share about them. And, we keep them in our body. And slowly as we accumulate all of this stuck, toxic energy in our body, we think it's going to happen. You're going to start having pain in your body. You're going to be physical. You're going to explode. You have a nervous breakdown. It's going to start bubbling up in your thoughts. So, but we never taught how to process our emotions. We never taught about things that happen. Like just shut up, don't cry, swallow it, move on. But it doesn't really work like that. All the things that have happened to us are registered in our subconscious mind. And so some of these deeper practices, you'll see like doing a breath work. Sometimes just emotions come up. Sometimes you start crying or laughing or you want to scream. And animals in the wild do it all the time. Like if a gazelle gets chased by a cheetah and it gets caught, first thing nervous system does is shuts down, it freezes. Then it's going to take it somewhere. It's about to eat it. It's got maybe sometimes if it hasn't been killed already, adrenaline, boom, takes off, fight or flight, runs away. If it survives, the next thing it does is it goes into this like seizure. And that seizure, that tremoring is releasing the the residue of all of that like adrenaline trauma that was stored in the body. It's like shaking it out, the nervous system shaking. That's why sometimes people in breath work or in plant medicine ceremonies start twitching. So their nervous system is like trying to release the trauma that's been stored there. And so we don't really have practice to do that, but things like ecstatic dance, things like shaking, things like breath work, all these things are ways that we can release some of this from our system, right? That's why some people feel so good working out. It clears their minds, like they're expending some of this energy. And then on a deeper level, it's like going into some of those beliefs. And that's where some of the practice like elemental rhythm, like we guide people. We use the breath work to change their state, get out of their mind, use a higher vibrational emotion like gratitude, bring them into their heart, and then we explore. We try to shift their perspective, maybe bring back a memory. How can we change? How can we see a different story? Because the reality of it is, the trauma people experience is not what's following them around in their lives. Yeah, maybe something happened when you were a kid, but that thing is not following you everywhere. Maybe that person that beat you up in school is not, still following you around at the age of 40, but you're going to feel that because you attach a belief to the trauma. The belief is I'm weak. I'm not good enough. I can't trust these kind of people. If I speak in front of a crowd, people might laugh at me. So we attach that belief and we carry that subconsciously for our whole life. So the ability to go in and process those beliefs, to show ourselves that they're not true, going beyond the mind and really kind of going into the emotional body, that's where you're going to really see a lot of change. So we pick up all these beliefs and we can change those in our life. And you can reprogram the subconscious mind with repetition, emotion, and visualization, which are all perfect things for breathwork in a daily practice. And many people that start doing breathwork are saying like, oh, like I feel so different. I'm not as stressed anymore, or I have more confidence or whatever. So we've weaved that into like our process to like really get specific. But even just sometimes breathing alone for 30 minutes will help you to release emotion. Sometimes you have memories come up. Sometimes you go into this flow state where you can get really creative and you get ideas. And so many ideas that I've got has been through breath work and how we've kind of evolved our company and come up with like just really cool things and new programs and stuff like that. So, what I would say is like, you got to explore, and you got to listen to your intuition. Like you'll find breath work that you resonate with. Like, like not everyone comes to elemental rhythm and say, this is my thing. But the people that do, they go deep on it, right? Because it resonates with them. And there's so many different styles of breath work out there. There's Wim Hof breathing. There's transformational breathing. There's like all kinds of breathwork brands that are coming out there. And I think they're all good, because they all are going to be like attracting something that someone's going to resonate with. And this is why I tell people, going back to the singing thing as well, is like finding your own authentic vibration, who you are and how you express yourself. You're going to attract the right people that are going to resonate with that. So the more clear you can get on what that frequency that you want to emit that's true to you, the more you're going to attract the right people into your life. That's either relationships, partnerships, friends, customers. When we're pretending to be someone else, when we're like ChatGPT's telling us what to say, or we're copying this person, you're kind of being like a false kind of a version of yourself. And it's not anyone's fault because a lot of people are insecure or scared. So it's like part of it is finding yourself and not being afraid to show who you really are and find that strength and what that thing is that you have that's special to offer and doubling down on that, putting all your intention into that. And that's some of the things that I've learned that breathwork has helped me to see. So, and that just starts with that daily practice.
One of the things that I thought was also unique, and maybe it's not unique, but I think that it is, because especially given the name of your company, is that you incorporate the elements into a lot of your sessions, or at least the ones that I've found. And I thought that was just a great perspective to have. It seems to connect me in a much deeper way. But I'm curious why you thought to name the company after it, and why that's such a big part of the sessions.
Yeah, I guess it was just kind of as I was creating this, I was getting into ice bath, spending a lot of time in nature. I was really focusing on, like I was doing a lot of like sweat lodges with like Lakota kind of traditions, and, just learning from them and the reverence they have for nature and the elements and directions and how everything has meaning. And, as we were creating this company, I was just like, okay, like I'm doing ice baths and saunas and breathing and all of these things. Okay, like this is just a fit. Like it just felt right, to kind of sync those together. And as we're doing our breath work, there's different cadences of breathing. I was like, oh, like this feels like an earth breath. It was like slow and deep. And then the fire breath was really fast. And it kind of just like, again, in a breathwork session, it was like, hey, combine these two things together, bring the energy, the elements into what you're doing. And it was kind of like, okay, it just made sense, and that was me getting out of my mind. And some people call it a download, but it was just like a moment of inspiration, no pun intended, to inspire, to bring in breath. The rhythm part came because like I had like severe ADHD. When I was doing other breath works, it was just like breathe and keep breathing. My mind started going off and it started like thinking about things. But when I was syncing it to the rhythm of the music, it just locked me in. And I was going deeper, faster, and having these experiences more consistently. And so those two things, they kind of just came together. But again, it was like from doing breath work where I kind of got out of my head and was inspired to kind of like experiment with these things. And they stuck.
Gio, I've got two more questions for you. The first is, if people want to get more connected with you, find out about the programs, Elemental Rhythms, where's the best place for people to go?
Yeah, I'm online, elementalrhythm.com. We have an app that has all breathwork experiences. I'm on Instagram at elementalgio, usually pretty responsive there if someone wants to reach out, ask a question. Those are the two places that are easiest to get a hold of me. We have some stuff on YouTube and Spotify for people, and just some free tracks on there for breathwork on our Spotify channel, Elemental Rhythm. And, you know, I put a bunch of videos up on YouTube, just all random topics if you want to watch along there.
We will link those up for you listeners as well. And my last question that I give to all the guests is, in your opinion, Gio, what is the definition of modern masculinity?
The definition of modern masculinity, you know, it's interesting because like I've flip-flopped back and forth of trying to define myself. And I really believe that modern masculinity is like, you have to have the softness and you have to have the edge. You know what I mean? So you have to be able to be strong, to be protective, to be supportive, to put food on the table. Like I strongly believe in that, but also to be compassionate, to be loving, to be supportive, to be sensitive, you know, because I don't think those are I don't think those are weaknesses. I think they're strengths, to be vulnerable, you know, and through vulnerability, I've been able to connect with a lot of men and to help them heal. But I don't think it has to be super feminine and weak where, you know, we go total to the opposite side. Like I still think there is something about iron sharpens iron, being strong. We do this men's events, men's retreat once a year up in Toronto. We had like 200 men last year. And it was beautiful because, you know, some of the workshops were boxing, you know, getting to the ring, and we did a huge mosh pit where guys were getting physical. And then we have talks about, you know, being sensitive and about how to be more soft with our wives and our women and our daughters, and, you know, how to kind of be loving and not, you don't have to be so edgy. So it's the blend of both. It's maintaining that strength and structure and safety, but also being able to be compassionate and vulnerable and not being afraid to kind of like allow love in, you know what I mean? To lead with a loving heart. You know, I think that's the strongest man that has love in his heart, not fear, not the tyrant. It's the one who has love, the one who loves the people that he serves and he takes care of. That guy will do anything for the people that he loves, you know, and he really is not the guy that you want to mess with. That's my opinion. And I think also modern masculinity nowadays is also about like the lone wolf days are over. You know, it's about connecting, finding a tribe, being with the guys, even if it's like, you know, playing hockey or something once a week where you get to be with the guys, sitting around the bonfire, having a beer. You know, like, where's your tribe? Who are you supporting to? Who supports you? Because being alone as a man or as anyone is really hard. You know, just having people that can support you. And of all the healing work I've done and the ceremonies, the breath works, the one thing, even where the people live the longest, is that support of the community. And so if you're a man out there, you don't have a men's group or community, there's probably one near you. And you just got to look for it and you'll find it. And you'll know right away if it's your tribe. And most of these men's groups nowadays are very welcoming and they're very different. You know, some of them are like that edgy kind of like, yeah, let's shoot guns and go hunting and stuff like that. And the other ones is like, you know, maybe a little bit on the softer side. Maybe, I don't know, book clubs and reading poetry, whatever you're into. But find something where you can connect with other men. And I would say that's super important. And to be able to express yourself and to learn from other men as well and to share modern masculinity. That's how I would define it, I guess.